it's a Saturday morning for you and it's pretty early out where you are. So thank you so much for making the time to speak to us and our community. I'd love for you to sort of, introduce yourself in your own words and talk to everybody about what it means to be, have worked in university offices and student offices over the last few years, because I think a big theme for this session is going to be what do university structures look like in the US and how do they look different from the ones that all of us are used to in India, and how can the Career Center in particular, how can it be, a partner in our job hunt search, and what can we do to sort of best leverage the services that, all the incredible universities that everyone on this call are headed to.
Yeah, thank you, Mega, for having me, and really excited to be here with you all today, and look forward to your questions. And I hope it's an opportunity for you to ask a lot of different questions about your planning and your careers and the universities that you're attending. So I've been working in the space of career centers and careers for about 20 years now, and I've worked at a variety of institutions, large public universities, very selective private universities, really quite the range, and serving both undergraduate and graduates and professional school students throughout my career. So I've seen quite a variety of institutions and how they support students, but also I think in particular international students that are visiting the States, which has been a kind of growing area for me in terms of the types of institutions I've worked at. Currently, I'm at the University of Rochester, where about 30 to 35% of our students are coming from abroad, from different countries from all over the world. So we've had a really great opportunity to really work with so many different international students that either want to stay in the States, want to return to their home countries, or go to different countries altogether. So, and I think that's many of you might be in any of those situations throughout your time in your degree program. So excited to dig into those questions and really talk through some of the different things that are important to keep in mind, especially in our current state in the United States, with both immigration rules and regulations as they are, but also post-COVID or during COVID, I guess probably we're still in the middle of it, obviously here in the States. So something that is definitely something to keep top of mind as you're going through your programs, and how that may or may not be affecting any of your searches or your planning around careers. And I think, one of the key differences that I think Megan and I were talking earlier this week about between Indian universities and US universities is around the careers piece. So this will vary widely from university to university with how active they are in engaging students and putting them through a very specific structure for careers. Many institutions really kind of rely on the students to be proactive and dictate the pace of their career planning, where other programs are very active in creating a structure for students to navigate. So I think one of the first and most important things as you arrive at institution, or even before you arrive, is finding out exactly what those structures are for their career centers as they support students, especially graduate students. I think there tends to be very different support services for graduate students versus undergraduate students. So, but most cases, it's going to be on you to be very proactive and very much initiating some of that engagement with alumni, with employers, as well as with other people within the institution that really do want to help, but oftentimes they're going to kind of default to you initiating that contact versus anything else. Now, obviously, if your program is much smaller, there might be more high contact there. But I think we can talk a little bit about those differences as we continue in our conversation. But Mega, I hope that's a good starting point, at least for the conversation.
Absolutely. And I think you've really summed up, some of the big parts of what we're going to discuss today. And, the one thing I really want to underscore, and which is what sort of, a lot of our students and the people I've spoken to who are headed out this fall have a lot of nervousness about, right? It's like, what is my role in this? Do I, how do I approach the careers office? What's a good way for me to initiate contact with them? Because I know I've heard, again, like you mentioned, there's a range of universities, and it's hard for me to know as a student where my university lies on that spectrum, and some careers offices have been extremely proactive. Some are already, making an effort to reach out to students while they're still in India. So what's the recommended protocol? You mentioned that it's always a good idea for you to make the first step, like not every careers office may have the bandwidth to reach out to, students, especially at some of the larger universities. So what would you recommend for someone who's headed out in the next couple of weeks, or someone who's already there? What's a great way to start that conversation?
It's a great question. I think there's two offices that are critical, right? There's the careers offices, and then there's also the international student offices that most universities have. The international student office is critical for work authorization purposes. And so if you're already very familiar with how work authorization in the States works, great, you have a leg up. But if you're not familiar at all with how work authorization and you're interested in staying in the States, it's probably the first place you should visit, because they can help you discuss the different kinds of work authorizations, the timelines that are very rigid and necessary for work authorizations. And typically you're having to plan 90 days plus before you're entering into an internship or before you're starting a job, to plan that out and provide information to begin paperwork and processing. So the earlier, the better to really connect with your international student office, which is typically separate from your careers office in most universities. And sometimes there's good connection relationships, other times there's not. So unfortunately, depending on your institution, that will dictate that. So I think that's important. Honestly, I think that's the first place to go, because then you can become an expert in understanding what exactly is required of you. And that also helps you then, as you're speaking with employers and alumni, to be able to explain what your work authorization status is and how that might impact your hiring. Some employers are very well versed in hiring international students and understand processes that are involved, while others are not maybe as well versed as that. So the more understanding you have, the better it is for your candidacy in applying for opportunities. So I think that's number one, first stop to go when you're at your institution. If it's not part of your orientation already, then you need to make sure you seek them out and find that resource on your campus. The second then is your careers office. I think it's, as Mega said, that tend to be sometimes very active in reaching out to you. And like our program, we have a pre-orientation that's online for international students and master's students to join our campus. Other campuses do not have that. So if you've not been reached out yet from your institution, I think it's important to stop in those offices, now you can do that in person in most campuses in the States, and ask them, what services do you provide, not just for students generally, but specifically for international students, because your needs are different than domestic students. I think it's important to understand that and ask those folks if they have special services or programs that are geared towards supporting international students seeking opportunities in the States or in other countries as well. So I think that's the first question to ask regarding that. The second question, I think that's really, I think is critical in this whole process, is what kind of alumni networks exist already within the institution. Many institutions beyond LinkedIn have other closed networks that are very specific to either the program or the college or school that you're in, or the university as a whole. And I think those are going to be really critical competitive advantages and reasons you chose the institutions you chose in many cases to access the alumni networks for those institutions. So finding out if there's networks beyond a LinkedIn group is going to be really important to think through how you can start to build some of those connections with those folks that already have strong affiliation with the institution. And the last thing I would definitely, as a starting point with the careers office, is find out which employers have been active hiring and recruiting international and graduate students specifically. So, we can talk about who hires undergraduate students, but typically that's a different process and not necessarily always the same organizations that are hiring graduate students or international students specifically because of the work authorization requirements in the States. So asking really targeted questions about which are the organizations that are active, who's hired students in the past. Most institutions now have very good data on who's been hiring and recruiting in the last 3 or 4 years, who's hired international students. And I think that's going to be very useful and helpful, because that might allow you to target your search to certain organizations and certain places, as opposed to just throwing a lot of resumes out to a lot of different places and really being kind of all over the place with your job search. So I think that starts to help you. And I think the answers to those questions will dictate to you how active those careers offices are in supporting you. If you get great answers and they can answer each of these questions, then that's great. They're going to be a very active office that's supportive. If they cannot, then there's things that you can start to do to supplement your efforts with the careers office that I think can then assist you in your planning as you get ready to jump into internship searches or job searches.
Got it. I mean, that was super helpful, Joe. So I think just to kind of, recap what you said, first, make sure that, you speak to both your international students office and your careers office. Check, always keep in mind what your work authorization status is. Be a little more aware than, an employer, like you said, there's a range of employers. Many of our community members want to join startups who may not have, traditionally hired from the international student pool or the H-1B
Yeah,
pool before. So I think it would be good for them to know. And of course, like you said, for work authorization, it could take anywhere up to sort of, 90 days for people to actually get that status and for people to actually know, where they kind of stand. So definitely getting this done sooner rather than later will be a competitive advantage. Is
absolutely.
there a way for someone to do this while they're sitting in India? Like just email the careers office, just like look up the careers office or the international students office and ask them some of the questions that you mentioned, like, do you have a list of, is there an alumni network I can already start to access? And it would be great if, you could tell us a little bit more about how these alumni networks play out. And for international students in particular, this is something that we're not used to doing very actively, in the sense that your alumni connections tend to be very limited to people who were in university with you at the same time. It's not a very I mean, of course it does happen that you went to the same university, but there are very few structured outreach programs or platforms like there are in the US to sort of connect with alumni who you may not have a personal connection to at the beginning. But I've been given to understand, and with our chat as well, that there are a lot of alumni who are more actively looking to give back. So how does the careers office sort of help in that journey, and what should we be doing to leverage our careers office to make sure that we get in touch with both the right Indian alumni, where I think there might be a little more comfort, but also how do we push ourselves to get in touch with American alumni, or other alumni who are not from the same sort of community as we are, and how do we build those relationships and use the careers office to its fullest there?
Good questions. I'll tackle the first one about can you do some of this remotely or while you're still in India to sort of start accessing this. Most campuses and most universities at this point have really robust either self-directed resources online, ways to engage with the offices online, whether it's via Zoom now, via chat bot, or just calling folks or emailing them. So most of these offices, both international and career offices, will have good active information on the website to kind of break down. And some institutions, especially if they have larger international student populations, will usually carve out resources. Like our office has an international student page that specifically has resources for international students. And so many offices, especially like I said, they are used to having international students on their campuses, will have those those different groupings on their website. So you can usually guide you pretty easily with those information. You can start to look at some of the things I mentioned. Is there an alumni network? Is there employers that are recruiting? What kind of resources that they have for international students specifically? There's one resource that I'll point out that some institution, I'll drop this in the chat, but this is a company that actually was built to support international students, both either staying in the States or looking abroad. So this is a company that we're partnering with here at the University of Rochester, and they partner with probably 30 or 40, I think more now, institutions across the United States. And so your institution might be using this tool. And so InterStride is a great resource for international students because it highlights who's hired international students and by what degrees they've hired them in the past. So if your university is a partner with them, definitely a resource to create an account in and get started right away accessing that effort. So I think there's a lot of this you can do remotely, virtually, resume templates and getting your resume in an American kind of version versus, maybe it's different, which might be differently structured and how you've had it in India. Those are a lot of tutorials, a lot of resources. I think COVID has really helped a lot of institutions, push more of this content online. So I guess a silver lining or positive thing from COVID is a lot more resources are available virtually for students now. So you'll find tutorials and videos and content that really helps you do a lot on your own if that's what you choose to do, or at least get started in some of these processes. So definitely more active than it's been in the past. Now, to your meatier question around alumni engagement and how to really get started with that, I would think of this as sort of concentric circles of networks, right? So I think your first is that your university as a whole, really large, you have alumni from your institution that have attended your university that you might have an affiliation with just by attending your institution like the University of Rochester. And within that, you have maybe your program, in your school that you belong to, School of Engineering, School of Hard Sciences, whatever it might be. And that can be a little bit more of a focus or another circle. You go deeper and it's very specifically your program, your master's program, whatever your professional degree program that you're in. And it's a smaller community and network within that. And then specifically within that, it might be Indian students that have attended that program at that university. So you start to think about how do you get connections at each of those levels, essentially thinking about, are there Indian students that are still in the program or have graduated in the last few years? I might have better connection because we might be from the same place. We're Indian students visiting the States. There might be some ways to connect with those folks. Then you have the program or the school overall. Hey, I'm in this degree program that might be related to those folks. They might be more likely to respond or engage with you because of that. And then you kind of move outer, and that your likelihood of connection might go lower as you go further out from that core. But it's important to continue to think about how do you engage people in each of those different circles as you think about alumni. Most universities will have essentially two things now: LinkedIn groups and alumni groups that you can be active on and researching and finding people, and then more of an internal alumni network of sorts. I'll show you an example of the one we have at the University of Rochester that gives you an idea that you have that. So I'll drop that in the chat there. And there are a lot of universities that have created specific university focus that are closed networks just for their alumni and just for students that attend their institution, which is great because the likelihood of response and engagement is actually higher because this is a smaller network. It's people that have been vetted, people that know that they're engaged in the program, people that have volunteered to want to help current students. And so there might be some opportunities there to increase your engagement level or increase the response rate for those folks. So I think reaching out to these people is really an integral part of the search process, the career process. And I think they can help in a few ways. Number one, I think they can help with just, if you're not sure what exactly to do with your degree, what is it? What do I do with this degree? What kind of internships can I get? What kind of companies can I work at? Where is a good place to work in the States? So depending on your familiarity and your comfort level with why you're pursuing these degrees and where you might go, they might just be able to help answer really broad general questions about the degree and the application, and exploring different ideas of how you can find opportunities for that degree. Number two, they can be really insightful to giving you information about the companies they work at. This is how we do recruiting at this company. This is the culture at this organization. This is how we've done well with international students, or we haven't done well with international students and hires in the past. So they can give things that might not be available online on their website, and they can give more of a behind the scenes kind of view of an organization. And that I think will be really helpful in the search process as you're going through that. And then the third way is, I think the most obvious way that we always default to is connections for opportunities, right? They might be referral programs that they have at different organizations, especially tech companies. They have a lot of referral programs that exist, or they might be useful to you to talk a little bit more about what kinds of internships, what are the important things to include in your application for an internship or job at an organization. So it's not merely, hey, can you take my resume and as I'm applying for your job, but more so is asking a lot of questions about those three areas, or the ones that are most relevant to you, and how they can be useful to you to navigate the process within these organizations. It's a competitive landscape right now in terms of job markets, especially the more technical programs that you might be in. And so employers have some choices. And so your goal is to see, how do you stand out from this competitive landscape of candidates and these alumni alumni can be really useful in helping you really separate yourself, kind of create some individuality, highlight some skills that might be relevant to those opportunities, and then maybe also be referrals if you're able to establish some relationships with these folks, and maybe multiple conversations that you might have. And I think the last thing I'll mention to this, and then love to hear more questions, is it's also a balance of hard skills, technical skills, and what we might call soft skills or competencies. So I think it's anytime you're thinking about engaging with folks and putting things on your resume or talking about what you can bring, it's a little bit more of a balance of those two things. While they want good technical skills, if you're attending a really well-known institution and a really good program, reputable program, they will assume that you have a certain level of technical skill that already exists. So the thing that differentiates you becomes some of these other competencies. Can you work with other people? How effective are you in communicating, both written and verbally, with other folks? What are the intangibles you bring to the organization that will help them be better company, right? What do you bring to their team and their culture that will be really useful? Are you good at solving problems, whatever the problem is? Are you good with change? Because I think the last 2 years have taught us, if you're not good with change, this is going to be a hard environment to navigate, right? And so it's really thinking through, how do you tell the story of these other skills that are so critical now for these companies that go beyond the technical? Because I think many will assume, because of where you are in your degrees, that you're smart and you can learn new technology or learn new technical skills, but these other areas are going to be critical, and how you talk about them will be really, really important.
No, thank you so much, Joe. That was really illuminating. And I think, a lot of us, I mean, there's a lot to unpack and a lot to unlearn from the way that we do things in India, right? I'm going to just pick up from a couple of things that you said. Like, for instance, referrals, which is something, which is what we keep hearing and what a lot of students have expressed concerns about. That I've heard that in the US, to get jobs, it's almost impossible without a referral. It's hard to get a foot in the door without that. And my concern, or, my worry would be that what's a good time to start cultivating some of these alumni relationships before asking for a referral, because asking for a referral straight up, where, is that something that is done typically? Is what level of comfort do you need to get? What kind of things do people look out for before they refer you, because I know that dynamic looks very different in the US than it does in India. And it's important to make sure, especially to not offend anyone or to be entitled to someone's time or a referral, right?
Yes.
Like, even if someone's an alumnus, how do you go about treading that sort of, making sure that relationship stays good?
Yeah, I think it's a really important question. I like to use the analogy around this question of, who you'd go borrow money from, right? The people you'd borrow money from and how much money you'd borrow varies widely, right? You're not going to go to someone you don't know at all and ask them, can you loan me $10,000? It's probably not going to happen. I think it might be very uncomfortable for both people to ask those kind of questions. Yeah. But would you go to a family member that's like your parents or things like that and ask them for that? Yeah, maybe more likely to ask that question. And I think so. If you think about that and apply it to these kinds of conversations, this is all about risk. So an alumnus would be willing to vouch for you and advocate for you, but they have to have a little bit of familiarity with who you are before they do that, because that's their reputation. They're putting themselves out there to say, I think you should hire this person, or at least put them in the referral pool. I think they're quality and they have both the technical skills and the other skills that are necessary to join our team. So in some cases, they're going to be looking for something else and having to get to know you as an individual, because if they're going to refer you or recommend you, that's their reputation that they're putting out there. So I think that can be established in one conversation, that can be established in a couple of conversations. But I think the default starting point is being curious about them, asking questions about their career path, what they've done, and being upfront and saying, I'm here for 2 years, I'm here for a year, I'm looking for internships. I'd love to learn more about your company, what you do, and how you were able to be successful, as opposed to starting with, I'm looking for an internship, can you refer me? into the internship. So it's kind of asking some questions to get to know that individual. Like I said, if you wouldn't ask someone you don't know for money, maybe after you get to know them, you might ask them for money, or you can liken it to dating as well. It's the same sort of thing, right? You want to get to know some people before you're committing to anything a little bit more formal with someone. So I think it's important to think through that, and you can start now. I would say these are things you can start doing immediately, because once again, you're not asking for anything, you're asking for information, insight, and to understand that. And I think everyone understands that networking is part of the job search process, especially in these more technical fields and some of these business areas. But I think you can do it in a way that's both professional and also taking consideration of their time and their willingness to help you out. And not everybody's willing to do that. Not everyone's going to be eager to support and help you. But I think most people have experienced someone helping them at some point in their career. And so they're wanting to pay that forward. And so I think the initial engagement is, this is where I am, this is what I'm looking for. I'd love to just learn more about what it means to be at your company and what that looks like, because I'm on the search process for that. So the networking piece is very critical. And I saw there is a question around, companies accepting applications for summer 2022 already. And that's true. As you get to campus, there will be companies recruiting right now for next summer as soon as you arrive on campus. So there are other, just more formally, just organizations that will be opening their applications up online that you should be applying to as well. So it's not either or, it's a both and process that you're networking and reaching out to folks and applying for opportunities as they're available at your institution, to be active in those search processes.
No, that's incredible. Thank you so much. And I think this is particularly useful for some of the folks we have on this call who are possibly going for spring, because it might be a good idea once you know where you're headed to kind of make, either, like you said, first get in touch with your international students office, get in touch with your careers office, understand what kind of employers have typically hired from you guys, from your university. Then maybe find an alumnus or 5-6 alumni who are at target organizations, build a conversation, have a relationship with them before, just landing and being like, I should have applied for an internship a month ago. Now I just look up some alumnus and I'm like, refer me today. Otherwise, because, and that's the trajectory that we see for many of our students, and particularly international students, who aren't used to having such a long sort of wait time to apply for an internship. And we'll come to the difference between India and the US just right after this. But yeah, I think that, for everyone on this call who's even headed out in the spring, I think it could be a good idea to start this process a little earlier and make sure that, your networking isn't transactional and is a little more deliberate, and, you build those relationships and have a genuine interest in the other person before you reach out to them for, something, like you said, as personal as a referral. And the analogy with a loan is, incredibly powerful, because I think a lot of us are used to, thinking of referrals as something a little more transactional, and we don't realize what a deliberate thing it is for someone to go and say, hey, this is a person that I'm referring. It's not as simple as forwarding your CV, but it also is some sort of, tacit approval of this candidate, which I think is an important thing in the American context. Whereas in India, very often it could just be that, hey, you sent me your resume over email or on LinkedIn, and I just forwarded it internally saying, I don't know this person. But in the US, that cultural nuance is super important, because then, your whole sort of networking journey has to start a lot earlier.
Yeah, I think it's important. I think that it's subtle, but I think it's an important that, there are people that just forward that, but that doesn't really advance you in that application pool. But that one that has a little bit of value, that have some relational capital, that I think that does make a difference. And it is important in the States, I think, to try to figure that out. Not everyone's going to want to help you. Not everyone's going to be, but I think that goes you back to those circles, right? The ones that are closest to your program and your experience, Indian students that are in your master's program, they might be more apt to respond to you and engage with you and want to support you, because they've experienced the struggle, and they'll give you some insights, places to stay away from, organizations to go after. So I think they're going to be a critical part of this process, because many of them will want to support students like you because
Absolutely.
they were
And
not very recently, in some cases, just
yeah,
like looking for opportunities that I
absolutely.
think is important.
Yeah, and that's the community we are trying to build actually, right? But
Yeah.
of course, ours is not limited by university. Ours is basically like, like you said, if you visualize the circle, ours is, Indian students who were
Yes.
sort of in your shoes very recently and have expressed an intent to help. So, like for instance, on our channel, and like you mentioned, other sort of alumni networks, these are folks who've chosen or opted in to be a part of this network. So, I would urge all of you, be it on, be it on our channel, be it on your alumni group from your university, try and, reach out to alumni through channels that they have approved rather than LinkedIn, where your response rates are likely to be sort of lower, like you mentioned. And make sure that, you're targeting people who've expressed an intent to help, which will make it a lot easier for you. So I think, Joe, now would be a good time to jump into, the sort of counterbalance between the Indian job hunt and the university support. Like Indian universities, typically in engineering and MBA colleges, or, all of our universities have what we refer to as a placement committee, which is essentially either a university run or or a student run a body of either students or administrators who are in touch with employers who come to campus and do what is essentially a job fair, but not a job fair in the American sense. It's more of a recruitment week where students are told by the university or by their seniors, this is the format, this is all I need your resume like to say. They submit it to a bunch of employers, they get shortlisted, and they interview in that 1 week. Whereas I've gotten a lot of questions around, is a job fair in the US the same thing? How do I approach a job fair on my campus? Is it that they're coming to recruit, or is it that they're coming to, to do employer branding or to, speak to you?
I think the first thing to remember and realize that I think we're going to see a lot of virtual fairs and things like that this fall. I think some campuses will be able to have in person, but as we're tracking what's happening, I think we're going to see a lot of virtual engagement, which actually could be beneficial to most students versus the in-person kind of fairs I think that we were used to in the past here in the States. So keep that in mind, that your campuses might have a blended approach this fall of some in-person activities, some virtual activities, and it might shift dramatically during the fall, depending on what happens with COVID, that we might see more virtual engagement. And so many have tools for virtual one-on-one engagement, group engagement, and things like that that will be available to you in the fall. But I think you do highlight, I think, a little bit of a difference. And the caveat for this is that it'll vary by types of programs and your institution. So some have especially engineering, have placement offices, especially if internships or co-ops are part of your program. They will have offices that will help you and essentially place you in opportunities because it's part of your requirement for your degree. So they're going to be much more active in supporting you, identifying employers that are tied to your specific program. So that goes back to what we talked about at the beginning of asking some really targeted questions at the beginning, getting to know your career center. Because if you have a program like that has requirements and has folks there available to you, it might look very similar to your Indian university experience in terms of that structure. If they don't have, if it's not required as part of your program, or they don't have a more traditional placement kind of structure, then it's going to be incumbent upon you to begin that interaction with recruiters through whatever online platform that your university has, whether it's Handshake or whether it's a university specific platform. The recruiters will be posting their opportunities. They'll be participating in virtual or in-person career fairs, and they'll be looking to engage with students specifically. And typically they'll indicate the requirements for the role, if they're looking for masters and undergraduates, if they're looking for certain degree types. So most of that information now will be available in the application process online in most of these platforms. And the career fairs tend to be a little bit more informational in nature versus handing out job offers or doing interviews on the spot. So sometimes you'll have more informational questions and getting to know those recruiters that are available on campus, and they might be staying on board for interviews in the following days, but everything will be driven through their application portal on the platform that they're using to evaluate students. So there might be those instances where they'll connect you into the interview process. If you're applying for very technical jobs, anything in engineering, computer science, data science, in those areas, as well as any business function specific things like finance, marketing, consulting, and those roles, most of the recruiting, especially for internships or full-time, they want to complete by October, maybe early November. So this is a very compressed time frame that starting now and over the next 2 or 3 months, there's going to be a high activity. Now, are there opportunities available after that? Absolutely. But there's going to be a high competitive season in the next 2.5 months or so that I think is important. So they're going to move quickly from a career fair where it's branding, awareness, engagement that's broad, to first phase of virtual interviews and screenings, to then a secondary phase, either sort of a second layer of interviews that are team specific or function specific within those organizations, to then hire. So there will be some differences there, but that's kind of the sequencing that they're looking at, because they're recruiting at multiple institutions. So they're starting with a wide funnel and they're narrowing it as they go through each of those phases of that. But the career fairs will be more of a mixed informational university branding, which could be helpful to you because you can ask questions of these companies to find out how favorable and what kind of international community do they have with their organizations, what kinds of progression do they have and growth opportunities are there for them, and then if there's any other nuance to the process that might exist. Now, in some of the in-person fairs, or as well as virtual, some organizations will tend to send their alumni. So there's once again a connection point with alumni that work at that organization. So that's an opportunity to say, oh, alum to student, talking to them about their experience as a student at the university, I think is important. So there's some slight nuance there, but I think these are important questions you can start asking now about what kinds of structures they have for your program and how active they are with more placement minded versus career broad services minded, that the impetus is more on you to drive some of the recruitment relationships and be actively participating in things in order to be noticed and stand out from the group.
No, that's very helpful advice. And I hope, everyone here is taking notes. We will also be, sharing some notes later. But the point is that I think, it's important for us to understand that the university, the support of the university or the way recruiting happens in the US is a little, more challenging than it is in India, where employers don't just show up on campus waiting to hand out offer letters. And that's something that we're used to and we need to sort of unlearn, as we move to a new country, that the process is going to look very different. So it's important to get that nuance. So thank you so much, Joe, for sharing. And now I think, all of us know how to approach, or at least what our framework should be when we're thinking about a job fair and how to sort of approach it, more as an informational thing for us, also to kind of ask our questions, know whether they sponsor H1Bs, what is their, do they have a diversity and inclusion a program, or is there something that they're doing particularly to hire more international students or diversify their workforce? I think those are important questions that we should be asking as international students. But also as international students, I think sometimes we don't have that confidence, or we don't want to put ourselves in a more tenuous position, so we tend to not do that. But I think for those of us who've been attending the previous few sessions, everyone who has spoken has told us that in the US, in your job search, you need to be a lot more proactive than you would be in India, and you need to ask a lot more questions. Like, stuff is not going to be told to you. You're going to have to look out for it. You're going to have to seek it out sometimes by going to your offices or approaching your administration upfront without waiting for them to make the first move, which is an incredible learning. And I hope, all of our community members really internalize that over the next few
And, and one of the things I think that's really critical and helpful. So I don't like going to large networking events and things like that. I know it's weird because that's my job and my work that I do like every day is like to go meet employers and talk to students. I don't
Yeah,
like these big events. And if you're not comfortable in those settings of walking up to someone you don't know, introducing yourself and asking some questions, the number one piece of advice I can give you is practice before you go with people you are comfortable with. And I think that the important part there is to practice just talking through what do you want to say about yourself, right? And this goes beyond just, I think this is a very, kind of a US kind of thing. It goes beyond the technical skills only. Like I said, they know that you are actually probably very well prepared, technically
absolutely.
speaking,
Yeah,
because of your education in India and because of the institution that you're going to and the program that you're going to go through. There's a confidence level that you will be prepared technically for this. What they are evaluating then is sort of these other intangible elements, these competencies that are going to be important to what will you bring to the team? Can you work with other people? Can you
absolutely.
be
Yeah.
engaged? So your introduction and conversation is kind of a component of this. So practice with your friends that are both Indian and non-Indian, right? Once again, getting out of that comfort zone of getting used to
Absolutely.
communicating in those, talking with your professors, talking with different folks on campus, I think is going to be really helpful. And being a member of a student organization, those gives you opportunities to engage and talk and practice, communicating and talking about yourself. And I think this is also a very American thing and thinking about like you have to sell yourself and talk about yourself in a much more overt way sometimes than I think than we're sometimes used to. And it's not bragging about things. So there's this balancing act of talking about what you think you can bring and how that adds value to a company, but not to the point of the best thing that they'll ever hire, once they hire you. So it's really talking through and thinking that, but the best way to do that is just to practice out loud, getting comfortable talking about those kinds of things,
Sure.
because that will help you in interviewing, that will help you in more casual conversations, that will help you with networking, talking to faculty. It's just an important part. And I think it's something that more and more organizations are looking for because yes, you're going to be hiring for technical, but you're going to work on a team. They might put you in front of a client. They might, have you, present to senior people at the organization. Those are real things that you may be doing that go beyond just the technical work that you might be working on within
Yeah.
an organization. So practice. Some institutions have online ways for you to practice those skills. Like we have a AI powered platform that helps students. They can actually
Of
do
course.
interviews online, and it gives them feedback on the spot about their interviews. And so there's things like that that many institutions have as part of their portfolio that you can do on your own at any time of day, and just to get comfortable talking through some of the things that you want to highlight about yourself.
No, that's, I think, again, super useful. And that's something that we are planning actually as part of Level Up, which is, getting people to get comfortable, talking about themselves, having an elevator pitch, knowing what you bring to the table. And that's the thing, right? Like a lot of us think we're a lot more unidimensional than we are. We think we're only our degree or where we came from, but there's so much more to us. And there's so many facets of our personality. When someone puts us on the spot, you may not think of it, but it's important, especially when you get only 5 minutes or 10 minutes with the recruiter, to make sure that that first impression really lands, and there's no shame in practicing it. There's no, in fact, I think that it's something that we should be encouraged to do more, and unfortunately we haven't been in our job hunts in back home here, right, where the focus is very much on what university you went to or what your grades were like, or more technical aspects. And
Yes.
then of course, as you have to integrate into an American workplace, those things could become challenges, and people are looking to see whether you're someone, they could have a coffee with, while work is on, or like, whether you could hang out and have lunch with someone as a coworker. So I think, making sure that you find the right mix between being like, I'm an incredible candidate because of my hard skills, but I'm also a great person to spend time with, and I'm in, energetic or friendly person. It's important for us to make sure that we find the right balance, and practice makes perfect. So we will
Agreed.
also be organizing sessions not just on interview practice, but also on just conversational practice. And it's so great that you're saying so many universities have AI powered tools which will also help you do some of this. And I know that some careers offices also kind of help you set up these conversations, or will just, and the more people you talk to, I think the more you sort of get better at doing some of this. But yeah, I think,
Sorry,
sorry.
Mega, almost all universities will offer some sort of mock interview preparation, either
Oh,
program or services in their office. So I think it's important to seek out when you're connecting with your office and, scheduling those meetings with those advisors, because that's what they're there for, to help you practice that. Most offices at this point have some sort of service either that they're doing or they're coordinating with alumni to offer to students. So that is definitely a useful tool to really help with that practice.
got it. Joe, I'm just going to are there any things that you would like to cover before I jump into the questions? Because I think we've already, some of the broader points that I wanted to cover, I think we have, and I also want to be mindful of your time. So we have another sort of 15 minutes odd on the clock. So if there's something you would like to sort of, make sure our community knows, then now would be a great time.
Sure.
And of course, then we'll jump into the questions, which may also, open up some other conversations.
I think the only other thing I'll mention at this point right now, and I see some great questions in the chat that I want to make sure we get to, is right now, I think it's become more common, and we are more able to supplement your searches, your job or internship search, with resources outside of your university. And so I think this is a really interesting time, especially for certain industry sectors. So while there's a ton of resources that you can access through your university that might be really active, you can also look at job-specific boards that are looking for computer scientists and really focused areas, software development, things like that. So there's more and more exists. So within your major in your program that you're really asking, as you're networking, ask about very specific resources that might be tied to your industry that you want to get into. So for example, there are like software development job boards that are very specific, that are crowdsourced opportunities from people working in those industry sectors. That's great. Like that's something that won't maybe show up on other boards, and that you can access those types of resources. There's platforms that exist out there to help you practice gaining some skills or simulating what it's like to work in different industry sectors. So there's a tool called like Forage, which is a really great tool. And you can actually go through a self-directed simulation of what it's like to be a data scientist at IBM, what it's like to be, working on AI work at a consulting firm. So they're free resources that are out there that you can practice and use. And then those things you can put on your resume, but then also you get sort of submitted into candidate pools for those companies as well. So there's a growing number of ways you can engage and explore and find opportunities that go beyond your university resources. So when you're networking, ask those things. Do you recommend any websites? Do you recommend any other tools that you've seen or used that might help improve my candidacy? Because those are just growing and proliferating, especially in a lot of the technical fields, but also in areas like finance as well. There's just a variety of ways to kind of, once again, be visible to employers and opportunities. And so the goal here is to kind of cast a wide net in terms of your exposure to that. So I'm happy to give Mika some of those suggestions of platforms to look at afterwards that she can maybe share out with you in the sort of post interview conversation.
And we've also so for those of you who again have been sort of attending some of our other sessions, you would have noticed that our more professional mentors are giving you advice exactly on this, right? Like, what are the platforms I can use to become a better coder? Where can I practice? Where can I meet other people who are doing exactly what I want to do? So I think that also helps people. And we will be, again, one of the communities I hope that you guys will join and look to lean on will be our community, where we will also be organizing exactly these kinds of sessions for you to sort of get a sense of what it is that you could be doing outside of your university's resources, and what are things that in the general broader professional community or sub community that you're a part of could also help you in your job hunt, right? So guys, I'm going to actually take a couple of questions now. I don't want to keep Joe for too long, and any other questions you have, please just hop on to the Slack channel and we'll get to those. Some of these may not be super specific to Joe, but a lot of our other mentors will be able to help you with those as well, right? So yeah, I think one of the questions that I think a lot of people would have is, can we apply for internship before we have officially joined the university? Like, how does that work? Because, some of our students are right now also kind of in limbo, like they haven't gotten their visas yet, they have admits, should I apply? What's the deal there?
I think typically it'll depend on whether or not they've received a university email address or not. That's usually kind of the best indicator of because that kind of then allows you to get access to all university systems and services and platforms. So once you're issued a university email address, typically then you'll have access to a variety of tools. So that's a great question to ask your university. Each university does a little different as to when you are officially kind of a student at the institution, right? So for us, as soon as you're admitted, we get the process rolling on onboarding students and doing different outreach and communication to them before they even arrive or start classes at the university. So I think that's something that might vary from institution to institution, but that is usually the kind of indicator that you're ready and can access different tools. Once you receive that email address, you can start to get started.
Got it. Perfect. No, that makes sense. Two people have asked about work experience, right? Is there a different approach you recommend for students who have considerable work experience versus those who don't have any work experience?
In terms of how to promote that or highlight that in the application process?
Or like what would be your take? Like, what can I do at university if I don't have any work experience to kind of like, make my profile more attractive?
Good question. I think if you have, work experience already, it's really highlighting what that experience was in a really succinct way. So what were the products and projects you worked on? What were the outcomes of those experiences? And how did you help the organization that you worked for really realize some sort of specific outcome? So whenever possible, results, outcome, impact. So really kind of highlighting those things within your resume, highlighting the technical skills you already bring to the table because you maybe have previous work experience already. So it's a combination of highlighting your educational experience. And if the brand of your university is really strong, you always want to lead with that. But then the next piece of your application is highlighting the amount of experience and definitely if you have more technical fields, the amount of languages or technical skills that you bring to the organization. For those of you without a lot of experience, I think the important thing is, are there things that you can pull out of your classes and courses you've taken so far that are project-based, that once again have outcomes or results that you can highlight? I think it's important to be able to show that you've applied some of the technical skills towards something. So it could be within a course, it could be a class project, it could be something within an organization you worked at. So it doesn't have to be massive or large, 2 years worth of job experience, but have you been able to demonstrate the application of that experience in some capacity? And if you haven't done that, like I mentioned earlier, there's growing number of resources that you can access now to really highlight that. There's online job competitions, there's coding camps. You can, kind of do a coding that might supplement what you're learning academically within the courses themselves. And there's more and more virtual experiences that you can participate in now, especially in the last 18 months. We've seen an explosion of those kinds of opportunities. So you can be doing those things, and sometimes there's no really parameters around. Some of them are just unpaid projects you can work on, where others might actually be compensated, but are short-term in nature that you can do side by side to your courses. So that's going to vary widely by your institution and what resources they may have. But there's some great opportunities there that are shorter in engagement and shorter in intensity than a full internship or co-op experience that you might have.
Got it. Cool. No, thank you so much for that, Joe. Just one last question. International students can't start an internship before they complete 2 semesters. Is that true? Because my sense was that after your first semester, you can start an internship, or am I wrong?
It depends on your degree program and level. And that's why I think the first stop is the International Student Office, because then they'll typically have the specific things. So I think it's going to vary by individual and what previous experience you might have had, what educational experience you've had, how long you're in the States. But there are stipulations with when you can start your internship, not necessarily apply for it, but when you can begin your internship, which is slightly different, right? So you might be able to apply for it, but you might not be able to work until you've completed a certain number of credits or a certain time period in the States. So your International Student Office is your best friend at your university, because the process for work authorization can be very complicated, and so it's always changing. And so I think it's important to start there, understand the logistics of your program and what support they provide you, and when that kicks in. So each university kind of has different sometimes ways they can address that issue for their students, but typically there is a period of time you have to be enrolled before you're able to start working in the States.
Understood. So say, for instance, someone who's then coming in the spring, should they go about, can they even apply for the summer internships, or are there winter internships for them? Shwetal has asked this question.
Yeah, I think it depends on your program and industry sector. It depends on if the university's built in some sort of experience into your program. So it might be that you're working on campus on projects versus working off campus for an employer. So there's some variability within that. So I think it's important to ask those questions now of your university to see, what's my opportunity for internships both in the summertime or in this fall of next year? When can I start applying? And I think it's understanding sort of the limitations and the restrictions around some of those things that are specific to the program that you're entering. So yes, you might not be eligible for summer. You might be eligible for fall opportunities, which there are fall or spring internship opportunities. But we're gonna, without getting into the details of the types of program, things like that, there's a little bit of variance there. So it's important to have those conversations now to start mapping out and planning what you're able to do.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much, Joe. Taking two last questions, one from Gautam, which is, what's the best way to approach professors for master's degrees? I've heard that we rarely get replies from professors. Gautam, if you could just mention in the chat whether this is for your application process, or you've already received an admit and you're trying to reach out to a professor about an opportunity on campus. I think that would help Joe answer this question better. Prabhu, I see that you have asked a lot of questions, which I think, might be more appropriate for one of our mentors to answer. But maybe one question, Joe could take is, should we directly reach out to recruiters from companies we're really interested in? Or should we, sort of like, what's the best way to do this? And while reaching out to a recruiter, how can we get their attention there on LinkedIn?
It's a great question. I think to me, it never hurts to reach out to recruiters. I think at any organization. So I think you should go into it with an anticipation that they might not respond, but at least I think you lose nothing by trying. I guess that's the way I look at things, right? You reach out to those organizations and you emphasize that. I think the way to stand out is to go beyond, I'm really interested in working for your company, because it's a great place to work. So if you send something like that, it's not necessarily going to grab anybody's attention. So think about what's most critical for you. What are you excited about working for their company for? What exactly about them it appeals to you so much? And do you have experience and skills that are relevant? And you should say so. I have worked in these areas, I have the requisite skills, and you're just excited about that organization. So I think you have to really think, what's the purpose and why are you interested in that company, and saying that up front. And so typically if you have a little bit more depth or personality to your engagement in those areas, as opposed to just something very stock that you cut and paste to all of these people, that's going to allow you to stand out a little bit for that. Not necessarily going to work all the time, but definitely will aid in that. If you've talked to alumni already before reaching out to the recruiter, you can reference that. Now that always helps as well. So if you say, oh, I spoke to so-and-so alum and they told me like to reach out to you, well, that might then garner them. So the networking comes back into play even as you're reaching out to recruiters, because you can reference that. I've already spoken to 3 alumni and now I'm even more excited to work at so-and-so company.
Yeah, no, that's incredible advice. And I think this has been an amazing session, Joe. I mean, I feel ready to join in American University tomorrow now. So thank you so much for making the time. I know it's, a Saturday morning for you. So thank you again for joining us here and for, giving so much incredible information out to everybody as part of our community. For those of you who aren't on our Slack channel yet, I've posted the link, and Divya has also posted the link in the Zoom chat. I would encourage you to sort of join there. Guys, also just one note, as is mostly as is a community that is focused on careers, not so much on pre-admit kind of questions. So about if you have questions about which course to pick, etc., our leap scholar counselors, one of whom is on this call today, Jay, hi Jay, would be actually much better placed to answer questions about scholarships, answer questions about what universities and what programs might be a good fit for you. So if you've already received an admit to the US, please do hop on to Slack. I think the community is likely to be, at least LevelUp is likely to be a lot more useful for you once you already receive an admit and are headed to the US soon. For the rest of you, who are on this call, please do join the Slack channel. And over the next few weeks, as you fly out, good luck with getting to the US. A bunch of you on this call are actually already in the US right now. So it would be great if on Slack, you could talk about how you're feeling, what's happening, how your flight experience was. A lot of our students who are still to head out have a lot of questions around that. So please do share with the community so that it helps put the rest of our 300 students at ease and, they feel better about coming soon. I know it's a big decision and, good luck to all of you flying out in the next few weeks. We'll be doing a lot of interview specific and career specific sessions over the next couple of weeks, guys, as internship season heats up. And also look out on the Slack channel. We will be posting internship deadlines for H-1B friendly companies. So companies that have typically sponsored H-1Bs, we'll be posting internship links to where you can apply, and wherever possible, we'll hopefully have a mentor who can guide you from that company through the interview process. So thank you so much. And again, thank you to Joe. It's been wonderful. And I hope that, we can see you not virtually very soon. So Shrit might be able to see you since he's also just hanging around in Rochester at the moment.
Hanging in Rochester. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity. I think it's been, I hope it was helpful in terms of the conversation with you all, but I really enjoyed the discussion this morning.
Yeah, thank you so much. And take care, everybody. It would be great if you guys could just quickly turn your videos on so we can take a quick group picture, for our LinkedIn, for the rest of our community to see what they missed out on. So please quickly just turn your video on for a minute. That would be super great. Thanks. Hi, Prabhu. Hi, Shaurya. Hi, Ashish. Hi, Divya. Hi, Shwetal. Guys, come on, it's just a minute. We have no excuse. It's not 9 a.m. our time. Look at how great Joe and Simona look, and they're in the US right now. Cool. Awesome. Hi, Mekla. Hi, Sagrika. Nice to finally put a face to the name. Anyway, smile, guys. And I'll see you hopefully very soon. And yeah, if any of you are not on Slack already, please do sort of, join the community, and we'll be posting more updates there. Thank you so much, Joe. Take care, everybody.
Good luck, everyone.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, Jay.
Bye.